Everyone has their own destiny, something they were always meant to do. But in a world where that very same destiny is predetermined, what if the circumstances of your birth meant you could never achieve your dreams? Our story begins as a girl steps into the woods to fill her bucket in the pond, and the pool glows with an otherworldly light. And right away, we know what the girl knows, that there's something strange and wondrous and beautiful about this world. Something magic. This is Hat Atelier, an ongoing 2016 manga by Kamome Shirahama who, despite what social media may tell you, is not a sentient brush buddy. Hat tells the story of Coco, a young seamstress who lives in a world brimming with magic. But here's the kicker. No one except for witches knows how magic is created. Commoners and nobles alike can appreciate and benefit from magic's many wonders and use enchanted contraptions crafted by witch artisans. But this society relies on witches for access to all uses of magic. The world of witches is one of secrecy, and no one has ever even seen a witch cast a spell. Ever since she was a girl, Coco has loved magic, but at a distance. Witches need to be born witches with inherent magical potential. One doesn't simply learn how to cast spells if they have no magical ability. So no matter how much Coco might yearn to create her own magic, she'll never be able to. Despite being enraptured by the idea of magic, and even given her own novelty spellbook by a witch as a child, there's no way a non-witch could ever hope to become one. One fateful day, a Pegasus caravan flies down to Coco's hometown, and Coco meets the witch Alan Walker? Dude, nobody even knows who that is anymore. Kefri. And I'm being so brave talking about this series before any official pronunciations are announced. Kefri, like most witches, is called upon to perform an act of magic, and as is customary, everyone has to leave the premises for the witch to perform his spell unseen. But before that, Kefri takes a liking to the magic-obsessed girl, and quietly remarks at the precision of Coco's seamstressing, her well-practiced, steady hands denoting years of honed skill. As Kefri locks himself away to cast his spell, Coco's curiosity gets the best of her. After all, this might be the only chance she'll ever be able to see a witch actually perform magic. And so, she sneaks up to the rooftop and peers down below at the witch casting his spell, and she sees it, the secret behind magic, witches, and this entire world. Drawing. Witches cast their spells by drawing them. There's no somatic component, no verbal incantations, no cauldrons or bubbles or fancy wands, staffs, scrolls. Spells in this world are intricately drawn patterns, with every brush stroke and connecting line altering the way these spells are conjured. That's why Kefri was so impressed with her seamstressing, because of the straightness of her line, no doubt imagining how useful such a careful hand would be in a magical world that exists because of them. With the witch's secret in tow, Coco decides to take the leap into the realm of magic for herself. Remember that silly book of spells and ink pen she got all those years ago from this certainly trustworthy looking man? Surely those weren't real spells, right? Coco copies what she sees in the book and it works. Coco casts her very first spell. Copying the spells this way works, but it never really makes real magic like what she's seen other witches do. So she takes her paper, puts it over a spell, and decides to trace it so that she can replicate a spell perfectly. Out of nowhere, the sigil explodes into a surge of darkness which swells and devours, her home being enveloped in a magic she can't control, and in her horror, she realizes her mother is caught in the spell, turned to stone, utterly lost to a power both unknowable and irreversible. Kefri arrives just in time, barely saving Coco's life, but now the elder witch has a choice. Either do what witches are taught to do, erase Coco's memories, or let the devastated, grieving young girl keep those last memories of her mother's face. With Coco's memories and her mother's fate hanging in the balance of his answer, Kefri decides to take Coco under his wing to learn magic, properly this time, with the only caveat being that she can never tell the regular folks that she was and is just like them, that there is no barrier to magic like everyone thinks, that anyone could be a witch. It's not often that I read something and realize in real time that what I'm reading is a 10 out of 10. It's happened in Berserk's Golden Age arc, where the gritty, grimdark facade of the Black Swordsman arc lifts, and you realize that what you're really reading is this beautiful, tragic character study, a story of 3 intertwining relationships. It's happened with One Piece, as the crescendos of shonen action and emotional storytelling culminated in arcs like Enies Lobby and Marineford. It happened when I was a kid watching 360p rips of Evangelion and Serial Experiments Lane on weird sites that probably infected my family computer with more viruses than YouTube comments telling Shinji to get in the robot. It's that extremely rarefied air that I hold Witch Hat Atelier in regard to. I'm not joking, it's that good. By volume 5, and probably anyone who's read up to volume 5 can attest, I was sold that I was reading one of the best manga I had ever experienced. What makes Witch Hat so resoundingly powerful isn't just because it's a great fantasy story, because it is, but also how thoughtfully it doubles as an extended metaphor for one's own artistic journey, the pursuit of one's passions, and how, as corny as it sounds, art and creativity can be akin to magic. Magic being drawing in this world isn't just a gimmick. Art and the study of art is something that Witch Hat Atelier has a deep reverence for. Aside from literally being the foundation of its magic system, the entire manga reads like a love letter to the medium of comics. One of the first things you'll see when people talk about Witch Hat Atelier is the paneling. And that might seem like it's a really weird thing to universally praise if the paneling actually wasn't some of the most gorgeous manga illustrations I've ever seen. There's this sense of curiosity and joy and wonder seeped into these pages, and the manga is at its peak when these panels just explode into magical spells, fantastical locations, or almost tapestry-like murals of old legends. One of my favorite pages is when the girls are exploring a new city for the first time, and the stone stairwells extend the panels directly into the next page. It's so simple, but so playful and self-aware. There's countless nods to Muka-style Art Nouveau, Art Deco, and classic shoujo manga of yesteryear. It might seem like a silly thing to say, but this is a manga that's proud of being a manga. It's an elegant celebration of its craft, and it's a manga determined to use its format to create the same magic through art as the witches within its pages do. And also an aside, but Shirahama draws all this traditionally with an ink pen and no digital tools. Like, what the actual fuck, dude? An atelier is a residence for typically one-on-one art education directly under a mentor or master. So running with this art is magic theme, we have certified witches like Keyfree training their new witch apprentices, who can then in their own right someday become full-fledged witches, taking apprentices of their own. After the events of the opening chapter, Coco joins Keyfree's atelier and becomes the 4th apprentice witch studying under him alongside the rest of our main cast. And what a cast it is. We have a god who's the broody Sasuke rival type character who initially views Coco as her rival, someone that doesn't belong and more so hasn't earned her spot. We have Tessia, the sunshine girly who's obsessed with all things cute, fluffy, and pink, and Riche, the chilly and aloof one who turns into a total chaos goblin when you get to know her. All of the characters in Witch Hat Atelier are brilliant. They're so lovable and whimsical, and Shirahama puts so much life into their banter, their expressions, and isn't afraid to let them be just silly little guys, just as often as they're incredibly badass, dorkily relatable, or heartbreakingly real. But the brilliance is that all of these characters have their own love-hate relationship with art and drawing, which extends naturally to their relationship with magic. And it's through this ongoing marriage, this extended metaphor of the two concepts, that Shirahama touches on some very specific topics pertaining to art, creativity, and even the relationship one has and responsibility to the things they create. Coco is of course brand new to the world of magic, and we see through her eyes what it's like being not only a beginner, but someone who knows that pain of being an outsider to a world that she once only saw with rose-colored glasses. She's a newbie artist learning that the art world has its own fair share of problems, injustices, and bad faith actors. Coco is forbidden knowledge about the secret of magic, that it's not some exclusive birthright, but a skill anyone can learn and practice, weighs on her heavily. And that's something we'll get a little bit into later, so put a pin on that thought. Coco is such a great protagonist that I could probably rant about it for an entire separate video. Leave a comment if you want that. She has the heart of a Luffy or Goku type shonen MC, but with a quiet emotional intelligence of a Miyazaki heroine. She's not a magical girl Mary Sue main character by any means, but rather someone that constantly has to use her resourcefulness and tenacity to her advantage, coming up with outside-the-box solutions that no normal witch would ever think of. Remember how Kefri remarked at her straight lines? Well, in this universe, straight lines are her superpower, and creating spells with that extra kick that a confident line stroke gives is our first hint that Coco might be cut out for magic after all. A god is the aforementioned maybe rival, maybe lesbians, maybe a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B type character. She is a natural prodigy with a complicated past, which raises the question of if being naturally talented is all it's cracked up to be, especially when your peers think you're cheating, tracing, or just otherwise faking how you go about making art. Anyone that's posted art online since AI became a thing can probably relate. It's through a god that we also explore what being seen as a prodigy even means, especially when it comes with so much insecurity, and it's through a god that we explore this crushing weight of expectation that we have on those we assume things come so naturally to. Tesha is a bright and bubbly girl who wants to use her cozy gamer girl magic to make the world a brighter, softer, cuter place. And as the series goes on, we really see her come into her own with her own specialization of magic being based around clothes, fashion, and accessories. After all, what could be more magical than wearing something that completely changes how you feel about yourself? But she also has to come to grips with the fact that sometimes there's just a darkness in the world that no amount of pink glitter can cover up. Tesha initially brings this innocent sort of levity to the main cast, but as the series progresses, it's her empathy and good-heartedness that drives her character in really interesting ways. Riche might just be my favorite character, or at least the one I relate to the most when it comes to their creative journey. Riche is a hyper-individualist and has this deep-seated fear that through studying the same things as everyone else, she'll lose what makes her art her. She's scared that learning fundamentals will erode her style, her self-expression, and what she likes about her own art. And in a world where your magic is your value as a witch, that extends to herself. Remember what I said about Volume 5 being my definitive "this story rules" moment? Well, Volume 5 is the culmination of Riche's story, and not to spoil anything, but if I wasn't literally live streaming me reading it, I probably would have been in tears. I almost was anyway. And finally, we have the mentors Kefri and his boyfriend, I mean best friend, I mean fellow chef, I mean boyfriend, Orogio. Orogio, bearded Kageyama himself, is a big old softie, completely subverting the fiery temper flame man trope. Instead of using fire as a destructive magic, he uses his fire to keep people safe and warm, and I'm sure there's no tragic reason behind taking that as one specialization at all. But don't get that twisted, he'll still throw down fire spells with the best of them, being one of the strongest pure offensive witches that we've seen so far. Orogio's thoughtfulness also extends past his choice of spells. Whenever the girls are in a snag, they know they can come to Orogio for help, and he offers them the pragmatic advice that comes with being a professional witch, someone that needs to know how to give a patron or commissioner the things that they want. And Kefri? Well, Kefri is the girl's mentor, a cool, calm, collected instructor type, but he's also mysterious and sometimes startlingly dark. There's something about Kefri that he's not letting on, not to us, not to the girls, not to anyone. But again, we'll get to that. Building upon this sketch of our main characters, there's side characters and arcs that are introduced that are clear analogs for the real-life industry of being a professional artist. There's this entire arc that's essentially one big Anime Expo-style artist's alley, with vendors selling their magical contraptions and seeking sponsors for their new spells. There's chapters that deal with commissions, with art block, with false accusations of plagiarism, with toxic art instructors, with finding the right tools for you even if they're not what everyone else uses. The highs and lows of high school football, art education, are all here in both their overwhelming triumphs and their devastating setbacks. This is a story by artists for artists, something more akin to Studio Ghibli takes on Look Back than Game of Thrones. That's obviously not to say that non-creatives can't enjoy it, but if you've ever poured your heart out into making something, a drawing, painting, sculpture, song, video, anything, you'll likely have a whole additional layer of subtext to this story altogether. In these early volumes, as our characters learn the basics of magic, so too do we. Fantasy magic systems are a tricky thing to get right. When designing something as spectacular and otherworldly as literal magic, there's a thin line between coming up with something that feels believable to a viewer, or like your fictive world is the equivalent of the kid on the playground that insists he has all the powers that counter everyone else's powers. Hat Atelier has maybe the most incredibly simple premise yet endlessly complex execution of a magic system I've ever seen in any media ever. So we know that spells are drawn, but what does that mean? Can you just draw anything? I can't even draw stick figures. Is drawing that Superman S thing going to light my notebook on fire? No, that sucks, and no. Spells in Hat Atelier are comprised of 3 different components that make up a spell. Sigils, or the element of the material to be altered, signs, keystones, which are what the sigil does, and a ring, which serves as kind of the activator of the spell. And it's from those building blocks that magic can do, well, anything. If you need to fly, you would draw a wind sigil and maybe an alternating pattern of levitation and convergence as signs. Now put the 2 drawn halves of the spell on the bottom of your shoes, so when they're tapped together, the spell activates and a rush of wind bursts you into the air as if you were flying. And then you have the sylph shoes, a contraption that allows witches to fly. If you needed to use a spell as a shonen style elemental attack, you could have your element as the sign and then a row of bolt keystones that would fling that element at your opponent. The way the spell is drawn also changes everything about it. Signs can be drawn directionally, upside down, or even chained together to link effects with other spells entirely or amplify their effects through your own clever design. Rings can be closed to activate the spell immediately, sure, or drawn onto separate pages of a notebook to activate them on a whim, or even drawn onto clothing, jewelry, shoes, or capes to activate in secrecy. The way a spell looks influences the power of the spell, so every pen stroke matters, as does the specialized ink that you use in your pen. The magic in Witch Hat is endlessly complex, but it also sparks the imagination in a way that feels so much more tangibly real than most magic systems. It's kinetic. It's fair. It feels like something that could actually exist while also just being so fantastical that there's no way you'd ever try and draw these yourself. Right? And that's kind of the point. We're supposed to believe that this magic is just around our perception, something that could exist, but like for the denizens of this world, lies just out of reach. Maybe the closest comparison in anime is Full Metal Alchemist's take on alchemy, where the law of equivalent exchange grounds its magic system in a sense of believability. In Witch Hat, spells used feel earned because of the inherent logic underlying the magic system, and watching these characters come up with their own spells, like arranging these mystical little puzzle pieces to solve problems or win fights, is endlessly satisfying. Witch Hat Atelier is filled to the brim, no pun intended, with clever and inventive ideas for spells. There's typical shonen battle or fare like blasts of fire or water, beams of light, but the series also isn't afraid to combine some totally unexpected combinations to create solutions we never would have seen coming, like Tesha defeating a dragon by making a cloud so cute and fluffy that it decides it'll just take a nap instead of continuing the fight. From this basic Atelier premise, the series' main plot is introduced. The apprentices take their hunter, chunin, mage exams as we visit the different fantastical locations of the world, and the girls learn more about the nature of magic and what it means to be a witch. From magical academies to major capital cities to esoteric dungeon-style sites where the pentagram tests actually take place. But to say that's all the story is, a collection of tasks to complete, would be underselling what actually happens in this narrative. At the time of writing, the exams aren't finished whatsoever. Instead, Witch Hat Atelier is more about the journey. The story has been our characters' blossoming relationships with the people and world around them, in turn heartfelt, complex, and horrifying. A world filled with magic might seem ideal, perfect even, but this isn't exactly the case. There are rules to witch society. The most cardinal of all is that magic used to alter the human body or mind in any way is strictly forbidden. There was once an ancient war and a calamity happened, and the way to bring peace was to agree that magic needed rules. But Dom, what about Keyfree saying he'd erase Coco's memories? Isn't that technically modifying her mind? Don't all witches do this? Well, yeah, isn't it? Shouldn't that be an incredibly violating thing to do to someone? And what about someone who's sick, crippled, or dying? Wouldn't it be better to use magic to help those people? Well, that brings us to the next section of the video. Witch Hat Atelier is a world with a moral complexity unlike anything I've ever seen in manga. This isn't a series where the heroes are good, the villains are bad, and that's all there is to it. Nor is it a series where the big twist is maybe we're the bad guys all along. It's a series where the very foundation of witch society is rotten, held together with endless lies and magical duct tape. It's a world that's worse for upholding its own rules, and deep down it knows this. There's a certain defeated sadness as characters time and time again refuse people in need, not because they want to, but because they have to. Showing people what magic is breaks the rules. Teaching a non-witch about magic is a traitorous offense. All of this gets your memories, your life erased by the Knights Moralis, a faction of witches that uphold justice and lies of this world at any means. To be a witch means that you must deceive, and you must never let mercy interfere with that deception. This moral ambiguity is something we explore through several factions and characters of the story, the aforementioned Knights Moralis, but also through the Brim Caps. The Brimmed Caps are a faction of evil witches and the primary antagonists of the series, who shirk the rules of typical witches, finding their own use for magic that's long been forbidden. They're identifiable by, I'll give you one guess, wearing brim caps instead of pointed ones, and there's some real character design perfection as a witch you thought was good reveals that telltale heel-turn brim on their hat. With these renegade witches making their presence known throughout the narrative, often interfering with the girl's trials and, Kiefer's whole life and shit, it really starts to beg the question, what's wrong with what they're doing? And it's this philosophical quandary that's the moral backbone of the story. Is going against the system wrong if the system itself is corrupt? How do you tell the truth in a world where everyone is forced to maintain a lie? This is a series where morality isn't black and white, where the villains of this story are fighting for things worth fighting for. Why can't witches help people? Why can't everyone learn magic? The answer is simply and devastatingly because it's the way things are, the way things always have been. Coco is one of the few people that can truly understand how deplorable this world built on lies and deception really is. Knowing that magic can be learned by anyone, she sees so many instances where introducing someone to magic would drastically improve, if not completely transform, a person's life. Coco knows there's ways to help these people. She's just forbidden to do it. And she almost becomes this Anakin Skywalker style character with this constant will she won't she pull to becoming a brim cap, completely tearing her apart. And the brim caps seem to encourage her descent to the dark side too, with these veiled monologues of their little seed all growing up, implying that the magical equivalent of giving a child a live hand grenade in the form of a spellbook as a kid, that child has now become more dangerous than anyone could have ever imagined. So I guess all this to say, Witch Hat Atelier is fucking based? Witch Hat is a series that's brave enough to make the enemy not a tangible opponent to overcome, but a society, the corrupt systemic oppression of this entire world. Not only is this world so fully realized and incredible on a surface level, but to then dissect the very problems introduced in a way that isn't patronizing or preachy, it's just masterful thematic writing. Representation is another thing this series handles with a lot of grace. It's LGBT relationships, people living with disability, even a heartbreaking chapter about a victim of SA with a warning on the chapter cover that it can be skipped. These topics are all touched on and covered with such heart and compassion that it's consistently impressive. In Shirahama's world, these aren't token characters fulfilling some abstract quota, they're characters and stories with things to say. Now, if I've even remotely sold you on this series at all, I would urge you to read it before watching this part of the video. We're going to get into some spoilers, but I'll leave the context fairly vague, so if you're still planning on checking it out, you can still watch this and you just won't really know where these pieces fall in the story. But we will get into them. This is your warning. You know how I said we'd get into some things later, mainly involving Kiefer, the brim caps, and the morality of the series? Well, I wanted to talk about how Witch Hat Atelier gets dark. There's a lot of genuinely fucked up moments in this series, from the implied horrors of the Brimmed Cap's magical experiments, like a man and his cat who now seem to be one humanoid body, to the absolute what the fuckery that results from a psychotically powerful mage using forbidden magic on a living human bloodstream. There are moments that genuinely get borderline terrifying as characters that we love become body horror Nina Tucker abominations. The memories of pivotal characters are erased, sometimes by people they trust, and the series takes on nearly a sort of whodunit aspect with just who the hell is telling us the truth. And as we learn things through the lens of Coco's naivety to this world of witches, one thing becomes perfectly clear. Someone here is lying. We've already covered that Kiefer is the girl's mentor, but he has this enigmatic past that still hasn't been fully revealed yet, and his motives are as unknowable as they are haunting. While he seems like a kind and caring mentor on the surface, there's a darkness below the waves that hints at something truly terrible at the bottom. The lengths he's willing to go for his revenge, the violence he's willing to inflict, the fact that not even his closest friends are safe. It's something that becomes more and more apparent as the series goes on. Even in the beginning, it's hard to differentiate if Coco is truly someone Kiefer cares about saving, or if she might just be a pawn in his larger revenge scheme, the closest point of contact he has to the brimmed caps he seeks. But why does Kiefer want revenge? Well, as a child, Kiefer's eye was stolen by the Brimcaps, and his memories erased, and he was found buried alive in a waterlogged coffin. In a tragic sort of way, it makes sense why his specialty is water, and it especially makes sense with how much he hates it. And what's worse is Kiefer's remaining eye is slowly going blind, meaning his revenge mission and entire life as a witch as he knows it are on borrowed time. There's more to Kiefer's past than even that. He was the Brimcap's test subject for a new kind of forbidden spell. To what ends, we have no idea, but Kiefer's convinced somewhere out there, there's another witch, a Brimcap, bearing his identical face. Custis honestly deserves his own video, but as a Black Mirror what-if scenario of Coco's own journey into the joys of magic, Custis's is instead a journey into hell. And we see what could happen if someone learned the secrets of this witch society and didn't want to join it, but was instead infuriated that nobody had helped him earlier. Again though, there's a complexity here. After Custis is crushed under a boulder in a horrific incident in the beginning of the series, he can no longer walk. And so for him to be given legs again through this forbidden magic, he realizes, like we do, like the girls do, like the mentors know, that this whole system is broken. Custis's rightful fury at those who cast him aside is truly the series' darkest point, where one of Coco's best friends dons a brim cap themselves and becomes a terrifying foe. And when it's time for Custis to use forbidden magic himself, we realize why these kinds of spells are forbidden to begin with, in one of the most heartbreaking, terrifying chapters I've ever read in manga. Hat Atelier is an ongoing manga with a gorgeous anime adaptation set to drop literally any time now. Wait, it's been delayed? Oh, god damn it. The anime is by Bug Films, the relatively new studio behind Zom 100, directed by Ayamu Watanabe, the director of Summertime Rendering, Komi Can't Communicate, and much more, scored by Yuka Kitamura, the multi-talented composer behind the Souls games. The trailer is utterly gorgeous and just so fully encapsulates what I picture when I read this manga, full of color and beautiful music and just everything you'd expect. Go check it out and join the hype. What I'm saying is, this is likely your last chance to read Hat Atelier before I genuinely believe it becomes a household name in fantasy anime. And I really urge you to do so, especially if you watched this far in the video. Clearly something about it strikes a chord with you. And if you're here from the future where you just watched the anime, hi, hello, I hope season 1 ruled. I hope it's everything you wanted. Alongside Frieren and Dungeon Meshi, Hat Atelier has sparked a conversation of a new big three in fantasy anime, and for good reason. These women-helmed stories are so different, so clever, and just have so much heart and soul behind them. And with the future of fantasy in such good hands, I can't wait for what comes next, what series these series inspire. Because after all, graduating the witch exams means you can take an apprentice, and taking an apprentice means passing things down to the next generation. And if the newest crop of artists and storytellers are learning from Hat Atelier, I think there's plenty of magic yet to come. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I really appreciate it. This is the longest video I've ever made, and I would love to keep doing videos like this in the future. A big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon and my YouTube channel members. Thank you for supporting the channel and letting me keep on making this type of content. If you'd like to support the channel, the Patreon is the best way to do so, and you get a ton of behind the scenes and extra little live streams and things like that. My entire first read of Hat Atelier is available on my Patreon and to YouTube channel members. This is literally me knowing nothing about the series to being essentially caught up with the whole series. So if that sounds interesting to you, there is hours and hours and hours of this read. So yeah, thank you guys. I've been Dom. This has been Hat Atelier. And until next time.